Good morning, data warriors, data curious, and people who just wandered into the room, but you will be so glad that you did. May I commend you on your excellent taste in sessions. This session is called Using Data and Technology to Achieve the SDGs. Now, we are talking about technology, but I would love you to silence your technology. Now's a good time. Put it on vibrate, but do not turn it off, because I would love you to be able to live tweet this session. Only the good bits I'll be checking during the session. And the hashtag you need, of course, is data for SDGs. Now, this session, the title of the session, is in two parts: data and technology, achieving the SDGs. So data and technology, fine. You can monitor, you can check stuff, but it's the achieving bit that I really, really care about. How do we do it? How is it being done? I will be poking the panel. And here, we have two panels about concrete ideas, concrete things that are being done, and that we should all be doing as a global community to advance and achieve the SDGs using data and technology. There will be a little bit of choreography going on during today's event. So if you don't like these speakers, hold on. There will be more on the way. So, I do have a suggestion for the title of our event. My suggestion would be I would just lock all these panelists in the room, bring them their chargers for their electronics, and then just wait. And I know they're so good, they would come up with a solution. That is not very practical, but it's a start. Claire Melamed is the Executive Director of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development in Data. I think Americans say data. It doesn't matter. She will be doing the opening remarks. Claire.
Thank you, Femi. Thank you, Femi, and thank you to all of you for being here. Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it may be a cliche, but it is nonetheless true that knowledge is power. And knowledge is the tool that humanity has to address poverty, to tackle climate change, and to overcome the humanitarian crises of our time. And data, of course, is knowledge in its rawest form. There was a time, for example, when we did not know that smoking causes cancer, or that breast milk is the best food for tiny babies, when we could not predict the weather, or understand the link between nutrients and brain development in children. We know these things now, and the world is a better place for it. And this knowledge is built from data. We live in a world, as we've been hearing this morning, that seems beset by crises. And of course, much of this week and much of the work that you will be doing will be devoted to the diplomatic business of fixing them. But we have something that those who came to these halls, to this building, to the United Nations General Assembly 20 or 30 years ago could only dream of. We have the data. We have the data that we're producing every minute as we walk the streets with our cell phones, the data that's churned out every hour by the hundreds of thousands of satellites that are circling the globe, the data that's analysed every microsecond by computers, and of course the power of which are far greater than that which sent men to the moon. Our task today in this room and in our jobs is to turn the potential of that data into real improvements into people's lives. And all around the world, and represented by many of you here in this room, governments, companies, civil society organisations, and some very brilliant individuals are working out how to use the data that we have, New and old, big and small, data from surveys, data from censuses, data from phones, data from satellites, and from all of the millions of devices that pump out data every day, how to use it to solve problems and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So if all that's happening already, why are we here today? Well, we're here because this effort needs more. The prize, we all know, the prize is in front of us. The prize is more human happiness and well-being, less hunger, fewer separated families or shortened lives. But we're not, frankly, seizing this moment. We're not seizing this prize. We face a lack of money. We face a lack of political support and a lack of incentives to collaborate. And that means that the best innovations that we are producing as humanity are not being used to solve the world's worst problems. We should remember there is a cost of inaction, a cost in lives not saved, of children not educated, and the risk of growing inequality between the data haves and the data have-nots. It just doesn't seem right to me, and I hope to you, that data is more commonly used for frivolous, although important, purposes such as creating new flavours of ice cream than it is to prevent malaria or help people displaced by floods. We all love ice cream, but I hope you can agree that right now we have a choice. In the years leading up to 2030, do we want to use data to save and improve millions of lives? Or will we continue to squander the greatest renewable resource that the world has at its disposal? The number of people in this room tells me with great certainty that there is room for hope. I'm very proud that the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data exists to do this job, to put data to work for the public good. I'm very proud to be collaborating today with our co-hosts, the governments of Colombia, of Ghana, of Kenya and Sierra Leone, and the GSMA, and to collaborate with all of our partners in the Global Partnership who are together in the vanguard of creating this new world where we use all the knowledge that is available to shine a light and to solve the worst problems of our time. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, and very much looking forward to hearing from you all, and of course when this event is over, to the changes that we can help to create together. I thank you. And I'd now like to welcome opening keynote remarks by His Excellency Alexander De Croo of Belgium, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Development Cooperation, the Digital Agenda, Telecommunications and Postal Services. Please come. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Let me start by using this occasion to do a short reaction to the news of the day. The key to progress, the key to keeping peace in the world, I do not think it is the sovereignty of nations. I do not think it is self-interest. It is, I think, quite the opposite. It's innovation, it's data, and it's collaboration. If we look at the big challenges we have throughout the world, insecurity, migration, terrorism, climate change, there is no nation who will solve any of these things just by itself, out of self-interest and based on sovereignty. But if we want to work together, then we need the technological tools to do so. And data is really one of the key elements that makes collaboration easy throughout the world. And this is one of the reasons why Belgium joined GPSDD last year, because we believe that in the development policies of today, we need to shift focus. And we need to shift focus from one metric that was the key metric up to now, and that is basically an input metric. That is, how much ODA do you spend? And if we still have this belief that if you spend a lot of money, if you throw a lot of money at some problems, that things will be solved. And we were never really in the situation where we use data to see if we were doing the right interventions and use data to see if we are actually achieving something. I believe that we need to shift from input metrics to output metrics. And that means that collecting data, that means that analyzing data, and it means that tracking data afterwards is a key element. Now, I would like to use the occasion to just discuss two examples that we have been developing over the last years in our development efforts. One of them is what we do in Uganda. In Uganda, we work with a private firm that is analyzing mobile data. It's analyzing mobile data for the mobile operators to improve their operations, but they also have a data for good component. And in that data for good component, we are analyzing data to understand issues of financial inclusion, to map transportation flows in the big cities, and to also track, for example, areas of food insecurity. There's a ton of analysis that you could do just based on mobile data, just based on the frequency, for example, of recharges of mobile services. That is one example, and it's just based on the data that is available today. Second example is what we do in Senegal, where we use big data, often based on social media and so on, to track the access to family planning. And that makes it very, very tangible. Thanks to big data, we can understand in which areas of Senegal a 12-year-old girl has a choice to not become pregnant and go to school, to become independent, to stand on her own legs, to make a choice on when she wants to be pregnant, from whom, and how many children she wants to have, and as a consequence, to have the opportunity to be part of the economic model, to have her own income, and to lead to more prosperity and more economic growth. That, I think, are two examples of how data can be used today. This is not about a big promise. This is not about something that we should do in 5 years or in 10 years' time. No, this is something that we can do today. Now, I'm telling here the optimist story and the story of the things that we are doing today. Still, really leveraging data to achieve the promise that we often talk about will demand some effort. Yes, there is tons of data available, but if we want this to be something that is really underpinning our development effort, we need to be sure that we have policies for data protection. We need to make sure that there is no discrimination on the availability of data. We need to make sure that there is an interoperability of the different types of data that exist. And we need to make sure that open data is not just some philosophy we talk about, but is something that we put in practice. But the combination of thoughtful, light policy and the possibilities of technological innovation and the ambition that we have to make development work and to make technology and innovation work for the well-being of everyone is, I think, a huge promise. And I have to say that I have seen this topic evolve. I've seen mostly evolve it in the size of the room where we are hosted. In the beginning, we were hosted in very small rooms, and this was a bit of a geeky topic. And slowly we are moving forward. And so this is already quite a big room, and it's well filled. I would imagine that maybe next year we show even more ambition and go for an even bigger room. I hope we will have a great conversation here. I hope to see some great examples of what is happening today, and that all of us can bring this promise into reality. Thank you.
So, did you catch the Deputy Prime Minister's introduction? It was digital agenda, telecom, and development, which means that he is already way ahead of many people in this room in terms of how does data technology and development work together. Deputy Prime Minister, stretch your legs one more time and come up here and just tell us, how does it work? Just briefly. Really briefly.
Femi, there you caught me off guard. But I should have known that, knowing the way you moderated some events in Brussels that we have done in the past. Well, first of all, some people might say that I have a portfolio of competencies which is a bit, you could call it a bit exotic in the sense that it is development cooperation and digital agenda, which seems to be topics which are pretty far one from the other. Actually, those two topics are very much linked one with the other. And I would enlarge it not just to the data topic, but just to the technological topic in itself. if we believe that any place of the world is going to play its role in globalization, then technology is going to play a key role in that. It's not the economy of the past that is going to lift people into prosperity. It's the economy of tomorrow. Now, the good thing is that globalization, I think today, is really delivering on its promise. Globalization, I would say, up to now, was mostly a one-way street. And this is things being developed in the Western world and being consumed in the rest of the world. It's a one-way street. Things are changing. If you look at the domain of mobile payments, for example, well, the edge of development in mobile payments is not in Western Europe, it's not in the United States. It's in Kenya, it's in Bangladesh. If you look at distant healthcare, the edge of development is not in the Western world. It's in Tanzania, it's in Rwanda, it's in Kenya. And you see that finally globalization is becoming a two-way street. It's becoming something where solutions are being developed throughout the world, and we are pushing each other to be more innovative. The strange thing is that the moment that globalization is finally delivering on its promise is the moment where some people are doubting on it. I am not too worried about that. There is a sentence in French which says reculer pour mieux sauter, which basically means sometimes you need to take a few steps back to jump further. I believe we are in such a moment. Thank you.
It's really nice when ministers can speak off the cuff. The panel is about to have the best introduction they've ever had because they're about to do it themselves. Kathy, why are you here?
Well, I think I was told to say why I'm important, but I'm going to say why I think this issue is important and why I'm here. I run the United Nations Foundation, which I parenthetically need to say was founded because Ted Turner 20 years ago last night decided to give $1 billion to support the UN and UN causes. I doubt that he anticipated technology and data would be part of it, but knowing Ted, he might have known that. But he did know the UN was critical and that this is the place where these kind of issues would be solved. So today we house 3 alliances that are committed to technology and the data revolution. Data 2X about gender, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which you've heard about, and DIAL, the Digital Impact Alliance, which is trying to bring the possibility of mobiles and technology for good forward. Thank you.
Matt.
Yes.
In a sentence, why do you deserve a seat at this table?
Well, I was actually hoping that Kathy was going to explain that to me, because that's what we agreed before.
So here's what I'm going to say about him. First person to do a sectoral commitment to the SDGs, and not to one SDG, but to all of them. Now you explain it.
That's a good start, but I think maybe in a little bit more than one sentence. GSMA is an association of all mobile operators, and mobile operators are companies that have traditionally been competing tremendously hard in their respective markets. And you have both Telefonica and Bharti Airtel on my side here, and they can testimony to that. However, there is one thing that we can absolutely agree on, and that is our purpose. And the purpose that we have is that we're committed to connecting everyone and everything to a better future. And that better future, I think, is best demonstrated by the commitment we have to the SDGs. And it's not one, it's all 17.
Eduardo, we could have picked so many people to be here today, and we picked you. Why do you deserve to be here?
It's okay. I think first of all, because I believe in it. I have the chance to be part of a group, Telefonica Group, in which our chairman and CEO is doing his PhD doctorate thesis in big data. I think it's not common to have a chairman doing a big data, a doctorate in big data. And finally, because now I have the chance to be running the Brazilian operation, it's the largest one in Telefonica, in which I have now the opportunity to apply this to a business that have 100 million customers.
All right, you can stay. Sunil, in your expansive resume, pick one thing that makes you the ideal panelist for this conversation. Oh, there's a little red. There you go.
I've lived my life in the world of technology and data, And I truly believe that technology, and in particular data, is an essential force for good. If we have to meet our SDG goals in time, there is no better and forceful way than using technology and data to achieve each one of those goals. I live every day to see the power of the technology and data to transform people in India, in Bangladesh, in several sub-Saharan countries in Africa, and that's why I'm here.
This panel introduction is going rather well. Maurizio, why should we be happy that you're here?
The minister said a few minutes ago that it's together how we can reach a better world. And I think that it's important to share here how we can go forward in measuring and getting these goals and important goals of SDGs for the world.
Shamshad, you've had so much time to prepare the perfect sentence. I'm looking forward to it.
I was listening more than preparing for this, but I come from Asia Pacific region, and I represent the largest United Nations Regional Commission of Asia Pacific, where statistics is very much an intergovernmental platform dealing with the government as well as the private sector and civil society. I do believe that there will be no SDGs implementation without getting the data right, and getting the massive amount of data that we need for several indicators is inconceivable without having the use of proper data and technology. And as a researcher, I have seen personally the power of technology and data, because as a student, when we were first doing our work, we did not have technology. But as we had computers, we could process zillions of data, and cross-country analysis could be done very fast. Software packages, econometric packages could be. So technology has huge power, and I'm here to also learn from all of you.
All right, panel, I've turned the lectern this way so that I can see your facial reactions. I am going to be watching you making notes. You have total ability to have a conversation with each other. It doesn't happen often in this space, so let's maximize it. Kathy, this panel is about how do we make these partnerships work? And what you do is, that's what you do. You look for them, you try and make them work, but it's not easy.
You're right. Partnerships are sort of like marriage. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You sure have to work hard at it, because everybody has to see the combined goals. I think everybody on the panel made a point, though, that the SDGs are different than the MDGs because they are universal, they are integrated, and they want to leave no one behind. Data is critical to all three. So I think that's where the partnerships are going to come together. We know you can't have good policy without good data. So partnerships have to agree on finding the right data to make the right decisions, and also feed it back so we can course correct in real time. I would say the partnership that we have with GSMA, for instance, is really special because it tied into 3 different alliances. It wanted to build on the work already being done, but it challenged each of us to do something new and different, and it's in country, which is where we all know the SDGs have to be done.
Who approached who first?
Who pitched who first? You pitched me.
I think that was the case, yeah.
And why?
Well, I mean, you're sitting with the money and the partnership, so we're always trying to expand our partnership. And I liked specifically the Deputy Prime Minister saying that this is a geeky topic. It might be a geeky topic, but it's certainly one that is extraordinarily central. And if I just may, one word more on, if we all go back a couple of years when we were still on 2G, do you remember that when we were on 2G? 2G gave us a fantastic thing. It gave us mobility. We could walk around and talk. 3G came along 10 years later and gave us sort of half-cooked data, but not real data. It didn't change much, but 4G gave us higher speeds and lower latency. And 4G is what we have today. But what it really gave us was a platform. It was the first time in history we had the same technology across the globe. And on top of this 4G technology, the platform economy was being established. So we got all the OTTs, the Uber, the Airbnb of the world, etc. Now, 4G changed my life, and I think it has changed many lives of how we use data. So what will 5G happen?
How did 4G change your life?
Well, that I started using the platform economy. I could use my Uber here as well as in Stockholm, as well as in so many different countries. And it's the same application, it's the same tool. And that is critical. And it sort of ties back to 5G and to society, because 4G changed my life, and 5G, no doubt, will change society. And it will change society through data.
Sunil.
You know, one of the things that probably gets less appreciated is the work that GSMA has done on standardization. Not too long ago, people had to carry different phones to the US, and we forget that. There was DAMPS, there was ETAX, there was GSM. Today, the world has now coalesced around a universal standard on which GSMA has worked very hard. The same phone, the same standard, almost every phone carries all the bands available in all countries. And it allows innovators to put common platforms, to put common apps wherever you go, whatever you want to use. More importantly, the power of the networks now, with the massive flow of data at a very low, affordable prices, allows you to put health services, education services, allows you to ensure that the infant mortality goes down, life expectancy goes up, and financial inclusion happens. In the last 4 years alone, 500 million people have been added to the financial network. And yet there are 2 billion people who are still not on the financial included list. But 1 billion of those 2 billion have a mobile phone. We can fix this very fast. And therefore I was delighted when GSMA took the initiative and joined forces with the UN to be the partner, the first partner on the SDGs. And I personally believe that through this forum, we should send out a very loud message to all the regulators, to policymakers. Invest more in ICT, invest more in the power of data, because that is which will result in a multiplier effect in achieving the SDGs.
Eduardo, you wrote something down. Share it with us.
Yes, I said, first of all, let just me emphasize now what Sunil has said about the power of the networking. I think that our mobile networks, they are like New York. They never sleeps. No, so they are 24 hours per day collecting information, and they have another advantage that they never lies. So we can lie on your social profile, but you can never lie to your network. Then in a world now that everything, not everybody, but everything is going to be connected, the amount of information that could be extracted from the network is huge. I would say it's almost infinite. It creates now some issues about transparency, about, you have mentioned in the beginning, interoperability or open systems. I have to be conscious that the data is the raw material of the digital revolution, and maybe it requires much more attention than have required up to now. What we're doing now in our case in São Paulo. São Paulo is one of the third biggest cities in the world, and two big problems. No, many other problems, but 2 big problems: contamination and our traffic jams. And they are absolutely correlated. And we are developing in a very interesting tools that we can, in such a way, monitor, or we can predict the level of contamination without using the traditional sensor for pollution. Just by, of course, you have used some sensor for calibrate the models, but once you have a calibrated models, and once you have set correlations between the routes, the amount of cars in each route, we can interfere how with the contaminated, the pollution levels in the many cities. Just by doing like this, we can, depending on and how with level of contamination we can achieve, the governments can have instruments or tools to allow them to change routes, to change the transport, the public transport policies. Again, I think it's a very interesting area for a city that have more than 10 million cars and are suffering for high contamination levels with huge traffic jams like São Paulo.
Okay. Do you know what I'm not hearing, though? I'm not hearing real-life examples and real people. I'm hearing big picture. Shamshad, help us with some positive examples, real concrete examples from your region.
There's a lot going on in the region, but let me point to what we are trying to promote in a different way. Of course, we are looking at modalities and approaches that can help improve the efficiency of the businesses, for instance, through this. So first example that I can give is the partnership and innovation that we have been trying to drive is really to look at the paperless trade, which is supporting the switch from paper to electronic businesses. This is not only going to give us solutions to simplify trade processes, but it will help promote transparency and increase the security of trade data and operations through, of course, open trade data. And full implementation of the treaty that we have just floated and has been signed by member countries can increase trade revenues in Asia-Pacific region by as much as 250 billion each year. We are also working to support governments across the region to improve civil registration and vital statistics systems. Innovations in this area include mobile registration technology and linking civil registration to modern national ID systems using biometrics. We are also helping build the capacities of Asia-Pacific countries' integration of the statistics, which is much more complex, but right. As you have more effective technologies and understanding of the interdependence and interlinkages, which is so much at the heart of the SDGs. So there are many ways we are doing it, of course, also in the disaster risk reduction and resilience, where technology plays a very important role in bringing timely information to us and how to disseminate that.
Let me just bring in Claire here. You've been listening, Claire. What excited you about what you've heard so far?
I think, first of all, the excitement is just the breadth here, the number of different types of organisation who are represented on the panel, and in turn, the number of different types of organisation that they're all working with to achieve the different changes that we've heard, and also the breadth across the globe, the fact that we've heard examples from almost every part of the world, and we can see that the data revolution and the specific changes it's bringing are really spreading to every part of the world and eventually to every person in it. But I think, Femi, your question that you posed just now is still absolutely at the heart of this, that it's very easy and exciting, and we're all excited by the new possibilities and the technology and the fact that we can do things in real time, but ultimately the test is whether we improve the lives of actual people in a way that they themselves can see. And I think that is really the test that we should all set ourselves when we come back here next year. I think we should all have a story of one person.
Oh no, I want that story right now. I'm not waiting a year.
Well, back on the people, I think that we have been working with data for some time, but what is new now is that data is becoming completely borderless. It's cross borders. So I think one clear message to regulators is to make sure that data can continue to flow freely across borders is really critical. And we launched a project some months ago called Big Data for Social Good, where we now have 19 operators that has roughly 2 billion consumers. And Telefonica in Brazil is part of it, and Bharti Airtel in India is part of it, where we're collecting data and anonymizing the data to try to draw conclusions together with other sources of data on pandemics, natural disasters, etc. Now, this is a critical and very complicated issue, so we are so happy to have established as well an advisory panel made up of UN Foundation, GPSDD, and a whole bunch of other United Nations authorities to make sure that we stay within the boundaries of what we can do. So it's critical, but it's complicated.
Maurizio, oh my goodness, you've got to do the heavy lifting here. Great big picture, interesting list of what everybody is doing, humble bragging, but no real examples. Maurizio, help us out here. Take us home on a high. No pressure.
Thank you so much. The Colombian Statistics Department, DANE, has engaged in a modernization process in the last few years, centered in exploring traditional and not traditional mechanisms and tools to take advantages of several information sources. And in particularly, we are trying to identify tools and methods to generate the information necessary for the SDG implementation. As an example, we started to explore geospatial information to measure some indicators. For the 1131 radio of land consumption and population growth rate, we use the resolution satellite images and its population projections through an algorithm developed with Google Earth Engine and ArcGIS. We pilot the project in 2013 with one series, and now we are measuring the indicator for 151 cities across the country. Based on this experience, we are working on the methodology to measure the indicator 1171, average proportion of built cities surface corresponding to open space for public use. And may I add that for the indicator 911, proportion of the rural population who live within 2 kilometers of on all-season road, then is using a digital elevation model and geographical information system tools in order to determine and calculate this distance. These are some initiatives we are working on, but to develop them is necessary to count on strong allies. In this sense, we started working with the global partnership, and then with the Columbia University and the GEO Group and NASA. And these allies have supported us in improving and scaling up our exercises. So
Right.
this has been an excellent marriage.
Kathy?
On it.
Yeah.
So if a girl doesn't have a birth certificate, she may never be able to purchase land, go to school. So data matters in her life. And I think if we can change that, if a girl can count and she is counted, it makes a difference. And if a woman works in the home economy and her work isn't counted because that time isn't seen as that, and so our data about what economies really look like and who's really working and what hours are being put into work, we can't really make their lives better. So I think that's where all of this is trying to go, is that girl and that woman whose lives will look different, hopefully, a year from now.
I always believe in having an audience wanting more. So we are going to wrap this panel up. And thank you so much. And then the room will erupt into applause. And you will change seats. Thank you. So, while we change over from one panel to another panel, we have Ambassador Amina Mohammed. She's the Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Kenya. And you will hear why we asked her to be here today. Ambassador, it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you very, very much. I've always wanted to be standing or sitting close to you. Well, I've got an opportunity to do that today. Yeah. But thank you very much. Excellencies, delegates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data for honoring the government of Kenya once again to address this gathering of champions of the data revolution. 3 months ago, our government and that of the Republic of Sierra Leone had the honor of hosting the high-level meeting on data for the development of Africa. The meeting convened over 78 countries, but more specifically galvanized commitments from governments, from the private sector, and from civil society, all with a view to ensure that the use of data and innovation in the area and the era of SDGs does not leave Africa behind. The theme of today's gathering is poignant, especially with growing threats to human and security of our planet. Our region has experienced the ravages of violent extremism and unpredictable weather patterns that have led to prolonged drought and food shortages affecting over 2 million persons and livestock. And let me not add to the challenges that we have all faced and that we all know and understand, those that have plagued our lives and livelihoods, especially in Kenya and the Global South since independence. While these challenges might seem unsurmountable, the Republic of Kenya is proud to stand tall as a hotbed of champions in data and innovation. Kenya is convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that this generation, armed with new technology, data, and innovation, will begin to solve age-old problems that have plagued our nations and peoples, harnessing the power of true partnerships that serve the interests of our populations. These platforms and initiatives are noble, but must be supported by concrete resources and actions with measurable impact on the ground. 2 years ago, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Deputy President, His Excellency William Ruto, committed to creating an inclusive data ecosystem involving government, the private sector, academia, non-profit organizations, local communities, and development partners. And this they did to tackle the informational aspects of development decision-making in a coordinated and coherent manner. They urged all players to ensure that capacity, infrastructure, and other enablers of a data revolution need to be revitalized so that the majority who are poor can be made visible and brought to the center of development. I'm reiterating this call. The threats to our way of life and livelihoods are real and therefore require real solutions. And if they're not adequately managed, they will in turn probably manage us. I'll not be making any new commitments today, ladies and gentlemen, but instead I would urge those in this room to support our commitments made during the high-level meeting in Nairobi 3 months ago. We agreed to champion the development of an African intergovernmental network on open data for agriculture and nutrition that will nurture an inclusive, multi-stakeholder ecosystem to boost capacity of small-scale farmers to use data to improve productivity, increase youth engagement in agro-business, and strengthen the capacities of statistical departments in our ministries of agriculture by increasing financial allocations and human capacity. The network has a membership of 11 countries, supported by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and the Alliance of a Green Revolution, AGRA, for accepting to support this commitment. I call upon other countries and partners to join and bolster this initiative that seeks to end hunger, to improve food security and nutrition in our region. The government of Kenya further strengthened the SDG partnership platform that we announced 3 months ago during the high-level meeting by signing a resource agreement on Friday of last week at the margins of this United Nations General Assembly. The platform, as you perhaps know, seeks to improve maternal care and the registration of births in hard-to-reach communities by working with the private sector to enhance connectivity that will improve information flow and data collection with the use of new technologies. Currently, over 1/3 of births in Eastern and Southern Africa remain unregistered, and you heard a little bit about that earlier on today, severely limiting life chances and posing an existential threat to our children. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to continue this journey with governments and businesses, with charities and researchers, taking lead in harnessing the power of technology and innovation to advance our development agenda. It's my conviction that this meeting will lead to increased financial investments in support of data, generate opportunities for collaboration and capacity building, improve policy coordination within governments to make data more available and accessible to all. Know that you have a friend and you have partners in the government of Kenya and in our private sector and civil society as we collectively face increasing and emerging threats that can only be met if we work collectively. I wish you all a successful meeting, and thank you.
Ambassador, before you go, see if the ambassador is really happy to meet me. Before you go, tell me about one person that you know whose life has been changed by data, tech, and it fits our development agenda, that agenda for 2030, a real person.
I can tell you about millions of people whose lives have been changed through the use of data and technology. I'll tell you about our school children, the first graders who have access to technology and to data through the use of the iPads that were given to them by the administration that is in power today. I'll also tell you about the mothers and children whose lives have been saved through the use of data, as well as technology that was provided through a program that we call Beyond Zero. I don't know if you've heard of that program. And so I can actually stand here for the next 4 hours telling you about people that I know personally whose lives have been touched, have been changed, have been transformed through the use of data and technology. Thank you.
See, that's refreshing. 4 hours of talking about data and tech and development, the development agenda. If you're new to the room or you just wanted a little recap, this session is about using data and technology to achieve the SDGs. In panel 1, we were talking about partnerships, how to utilize partnerships. Part 2, we're actually talking about how do you actually do it. Let me remind you what the hashtag is. It's hashtag data for SDGs. And I've just been having a quick look. I was multitasking, listening to the ambassador, checking Twitter. Dr. Munjuro Kabir says, can data and technology achieve the SDGs? Panel number 2, that is your question. Now, panel number 2. I am going to get you to tell us one by one why you're important in this conversation. Why do you deserve to be here? In a sentence.
Because I know Gloria, who, armed with data, convinced her government in Guatemala to change the national legislation on early and forced marriage. She mobilized girls across the country, fed them the data, and made the social transformation necessary.
And what does it say on your business card officially?
Oh, really? It says I'm the CEO of the global child rights organization called Plan International.
Excellent introduction. It's on the right, your left-hand side. It looks like a little mouth talking.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Friedel with NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and until there are people on the moon and Mars, every single one of the SDGs is going to be achieved here on Earth. And so NASA and the other space agencies want to contribute all of the data that we are taking about the Earth from these Earth-observing satellites to contribute to achieving the agenda, as well as helping countries, nations, custodian agencies learn how to use all this data to support the planning, the tracking, and the reporting.
Maurizio, why are you so important?
I'm the CEO of Millicom. Millicom is a telecom operator which operates in 13 countries across Africa and Latin America. Big data rides on telecom networks. We build those telecom networks. There is no data, big or small, without these telecom networks, and they need to be built, and don't take those for granted just yet.
I'm looking forward to this introduction.
Well, you ask why am I important, which I prefer that question to the one that you actually did ask. 2 reasons. One is that we're the custodian, together with people like Mauricio and Sunil, we're the custodian of one of the most comprehensive data sets that anyone has in customers. And it is clear that this data set can be used for all sorts of things. I mean, in terms of giving people identity, in terms of improving productivity for small-scale farmers, in terms of improving health. So that's one reason. The second reason why it's important that I'm here is that I probably am the funniest person on the panel. And that was a very good example.
And everybody laughed on cue. Did you ask them to do that? How much did you pay them? Alicia, welcome. Why should we be happy to see you?
Because I am the head of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are the technical secretariat of the American Conference of Statistics. And that means that we bring every year, and Mauricio Perfetti is here, he knows that, we bring together all the national offices of statistics of our region, number one. Number two, we are developing together with them the mechanisms, the methods for them to monitor all the SDGs, the 17 SDGs. Concrete examples. We have a gender observatory because we have been able to disaggregate all the information of women in all the SDGs. At least we are trying to say, if we're talking about employment, women and men. Salaries, women and men. Health, women and men. And, you know, the most interesting thing, I guess, is that we are the repositories in CEPAL of all the census of population, the household surveys, and we also are now developing a repository of the national plans for sustainable development and the indicators that have to come together with them. And most importantly, we are revealing to people one very important piece of information: tax evasion, country by country, thanks to data, thanks to big data, and thanks to geospatial information. So we are telling openly how much money is being evaded from your country that you can use for sustainable development. Don't you think that's exciting?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Unless you were hoping not to pay tax. Moving on. Amber Geach, you were getting up this morning, you were thinking about this panel, and you knew that you were going to hit it out of the park. And you were thinking, I need to tell the audience this. What was this? What was it where you felt, I need them to know this?
Thank you. Thank
you, NASA. Where would we be without you?
I need the audience to know that global citizenry expects governments to deliver on the promises that the SDGs hold. Global citizens armed with data will hold governments to account for the promises that have been made in this room and in the General Assembly to deliver on the SDGs. We are passionate at Plan International about making sure that every child actually knows their rights, but also know how those rights are being violated. And data will help us do that. It allows boys and girls around the world to know that, for example, because we don't have a lot of data, probably about 1 million girls aged 10 to 14 give birth every year. 10 to 14. Now, almost no government actually measures that. What we do know is that civil society and health workers and others collect that data. So that data we can use to tell you probably 1 million. But if we actually knew, we could address that. Let me also tell you another uncomfortable truth that data can help us uncover. Plan International collects from 1.4 million individual children and their families socioeconomic data every single year. That tells us that if you're disabled, you are 10 times less likely to go to school. Again, no government collects that information. So the power of, shall we say, the development data, the data that we collect through all the development programs that you all invest in, is really powerful data that we can use to fuel the change that's needed to happen for the SDGs to come alive.
Bob and Alicia are writing furiously. Bob, what's on that piece of paper?
I was kind of catching up on a memo that I needed to send. No, seriously. I told you how funny I was.
Eggs, milk, put out the cat.
I think, we need to think about... behave yourselves. We need to think about the complexity of managing this data thing. Because it sounds fine in theory. It can be a little bit paternalistic. And we need to understand the ethics around it. Social media have collected data and have used it, and they've used it in what appears sometimes to be a very benevolent way, but actually it could be used in a very bad way. The collection of data can...
For example?
Well, watching movements of ethnic groups, for example. If you take the mobile networks have the ability to see how people are moving, and if you can see people moving in a certain area in a hostile environment, it can be used very, very, very badly. We often sacrifice quite a lot of our privacy because of some short-term perceived benefits, but I'm not sure that the citizen is as well informed as perhaps they should be. And I think it's a big danger that we all think that we can use data for improving the Sustainable Development Goal, but actually there's a lot of abuse of that privacy that can happen at the same time.
Alicia.
I think that you're right, Bob, but let me say that what we are doing here, I think, is to focus ourselves on how can the SDGs be better implemented through the use of data. No? Exactly. And we are hoping that everybody is on the same, I would say, objective, because of course there's a lot of malware outside, but what we are trying to do here is to understand how we can use traditional data, statistics, and combine it with big data. Now, to go to big data, we need big companies' commitment, because they are doing a lot with big data for commercial purposes. But we now need big data for humanitarian purposes. So with the same examples you just put now, we can trace people moving in the border, for example. We're doing a project in the triangle of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador to track people that are moving from that triangle north, right? And we found a very interesting thing. Of course, these people travel with their mobiles, so you can definitely track them. But we found that a lot of people on the way were helping these people. We found a lot of goodness in the communities they were traveling, illegally, of course, and we found a place in Mexico called Tenosique, who is now like the center of these migrants, and that NGOs have come together. How do they contact these people? Via email, via tracking them. So there are things that can be done for good. So I think this is an example. Now, there are some SDGs that are more difficult than others. I believe that the gender, the SDG 5, is one that we definitely have to work on data, because we need disaggregated data for men and women. And I think the world is ready to know exactly what you were saying, how many girls are having birth before 14 years. But we also can help a lot of old people, aging people that are now becoming part also of what we call the care economy. So I believe that we have to use data and big data, by the way, but we need to make some agreements with the big companies so they can give us access to this big data aggregation of information for good.
Mauricio, you heard your cue.
Yeah, so I think you were talking about earlier about good examples and actual bringing down to reality. And I think there is a great example, a fantastic example. A couple of years ago, the UNICEF, the GSMA, the association that puts all the mobile operators together, of which I'm a part, of course, and ourselves got together in Tanzania to solve a very specific problem that was alluded to earlier, and it is the lack of birth registration. It's a very basic element. It's got democracy in it. It's got health in it. You're not a citizen if you don't exist. And the registration rates in Tanzania were less than 10%, actually 9% only. So only 1 out of 10 children were actually being registered. So they did not exist as citizens. We came up with a project, again, UNICEF, GSMA, ourselves, making our platform available for the social good by simply allowing individuals to register their kids through the mobile phone, directly from the hospital.
So what would they see on their phone?
It's just a little, call it an app. It doesn't have to be a 4G, even a 3G app. It's a 2G, quote-unquote, app, where they can send a mobile registration to the government. Since then, we've registered 1.6 million individuals. And we initially thought it was just about democracy and inclusion. But then we took the project on to Ghana. And I know the representatives of government Ghana here, where we are aiming at registration of 80% of all children, 80%. And in speaking to the authorities of Ghana the other day, they were mentioning that for them it is beyond just democracy and inclusion. For them it gives them the ability to plan how many vaccines do they need, how many school supplies do they need to buy for these individuals. So that's a very practical, very specific, and I would even hesitate to say it's big data. It's actually just data. And that's a good example of the things that a platform can be used towards social good.
Lawrence.
Yeah, and obviously the SDGs also bring in a lot of focus and a lot of information related to environment and environmental management, in addition to humans and populations and all. And there's tremendous amounts of data from Earth-observing satellites and buoys and aircraft, stream gauges and all, to provide a lot of factual information when it comes to providing information about doing this environmental management. And obviously this is where you get connections into people and how they're managing their environments, because that also reflects on where people are moving, where they're having conflicts, and where there are sort of enough resources and all. And so the information is not just sort of high-resolution pictures of the Earth, but there's information about precipitation and flooding and human settlements and soil moisture and ocean temperatures that can really support many of the SDGs. And a lot of this information has a global coverage, so it provides this consistency so that we can be doing comparisons and really be, and countries can really be helping to provide some of the transparency to their own public, as well as there's NGOs and others that can be using this information to provide the benefits of some of this transparency, which can get to some of the comments from earlier. I would say, if you want an example, we heard one earlier from Mauricio from Colombia, looking at urban settlements. But I would say that Colombia has been a fantastic example of how they've been using satellite observations for environmental management as well. And one of them is looking at goal 15, and especially looking at forest management, where they've been using every year over 1,000 scenes from different Landsat satellites, looking back 25 years to look at different trends to identify what's the coverage. And so if you're looking at indicator 1511, specifically looking at land cover, forest land cover, they've been doing this. And so when people come to us...
Did you just dig deep into the SDGs? Not even
one of the indicators.
A goal number. You went into an indicator.
And they reported 52% in 2015.
Impressive.
So, kudos to Colombia. And I have to say, whenever people come to us to say, what's a good example of countries that are using satellite data to support the SDGs, I point them to Colombia. There certainly are others. They're not the only one, but they're one of the first ones that comes to our mind. So our appreciation to them, because they're showing the rest of us how to get it done.
Amber Geese. I have a question here, actually, from Twitter. Cal Esserman, although data is important, we ought to build the infrastructure to secure data. Good point, right?
That's a very, very good point, and obviously a lot of the panelists have spoken to that. The basic infrastructure for any data collection will obviously be the national government, and while I represent a non-governmental organization, again, shout out to all the donors in the development community, invest in building capacity and strengthen national statistical bodies, because that has to be the core repository. But all of us have to take data really seriously. Civil society needs to invest in it. We need to protect it. We need to protect those that give us data and use it. And we have to work together, and that's why we're a very happy member of the partnership, because we have to learn how to share data. And while we protect data, if we don't get beyond the point where we can share data and collaborate around data, we're actually rather doomed.
Who would you wish would share more data? Where can you see, oh my goodness, if only they would allow that to be open source, if only they would collaborate?
Well, actually, let me point the finger at myself and my own sector. All this data that I collect is about children, because there are a number of evil people in the world that want to know where those children are and maybe abuse them or do difficult things with them. I can't share my data. I need partners in the tech sector that can help me share some of that data so that we can ensure that that is available to governments that can address some of the issues I raised. So that kind of collaboration that will allow me to share is what we're hoping that this partnership can help bring.
Lawrence, what did you write down?
I wrote down, in addition to the infrastructure and sharing of data, it's you mentioned the statistical communities, and we've really also been working and through some groups within the UN, trying to connect up the geospatial sectors with the statistical communities. Communities that typically have not worked much together, but there have been some strong efforts to connect up with that. So you can take the benefits of knowing the sense of place and the geospatial, sort of the sense of place, connecting up with what has been the more traditional way of approaching the development goals, which is in the statistical communities. So looking to see how do we merge those. And I would say the GPSDD and the UN have really been helping to forge that partnership. Mexico, Colombia, and others are good examples of that being done.
I will give you one more sentence, panel. The sentence that will make people go, I'm so glad I went to that event. One sentence. I don't know if I should ask Bob, but I will try. Bob.
With or without jokes. I think we can all get very excited about what data and technology can do for the SDGs, no question about it. I think we really, however, must also put as much effort on the ethics of the use of that data.
Alicia.
I just want to make a comment and then my phrase.
Oh, no.
You know why? Because I want to support one thing that was said before, and that is the coming together of the geospatial community with the statistics. We are doing that in Latin America. Now the phrase.
Okay, now the sentence.
Okay, you see what I mean?
Adding on to your paragraph.
My sentence is,
yes,
we have to break the statistics silence of women, of indigenous peoples, of people that are discriminated and do not appear in the statistics. Nothing about us without us.
Oh. Assignment completed. Lawrence.
Often the data from satellites and environmental information is full, free, and open to the world. However, we in the earth science, the research communities, we need help from the people that know how to connect it up to people and managers that are addressing the SDGs. So we need your help.
Maurizio, the last sentence that will make the audience applaud loudly. What could that be?
Data rides on networks. Big data rides on networks. Networks still need to be built, especially in the more developing countries. I will leave you with only one number rather than a sentence. In Latin America and in Africa, only 15% of users actually have a 4G phone. 15%. There is no high-speed data There is no digital citizen. There is no big data without data networks.
Amber Geet, take us home.
So data makes the invisible visible. It uncovers uncomfortable truths, and it empowers all of us, everybody in this room, to change the world and achieve the SDGs.
Ladies and gentlemen, your panel.
Thank you.
I do believe I even heard a cheer. Thank you so much. Oh, my phrase? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Femi Oke. It's been a pleasure, but not yet. That's at the end. Thank you. I love it when the panel bites back. Thank you so much, panel. Dr. Samora Wilson Kamara is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Sierra Leone. Do come and join us.
Technician. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me start by bringing fraternal greetings and apologies from our president, who should have been here. Unfortunately, he can't be here. But greetings more because he's a champion of this historic revolution that is evolving in the world today. It is very refreshing personally, as having been in the development game for quite a number of years, to see the emphasis on the importance of data and information technology. If anything has slowed down our development plans, our development process, it's been the absence of comprehensive data, reliable data, and credible data. And today, in Sierra Leone, we have, in the modern times, suffered 4 major tragedies. We had the war. From the war, we tried to recover. Then we had Ebola. From Ebola, we had a mudslide. And, of course, we had the sharp decline in commodity prices. And in our response programs, we have used a lot of data and information to actually reach those who are mostly affected. And I find it very reassuring that we are making data and information at the central point in trying to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, which makes it very different from the way we implemented the Millennium Development Goals. And I think this is very refreshing, and I want to commend everybody who is part of this big revolutionary movement, so that tomorrow I'm sure there'll be no one left behind. The partnership around information is also very important. As a country, we've tried to strengthen those institutions that are responsible for collecting data and disseminating data and information. We have Central Statistics, we have the Ministry of Finance. But we have used data in many aspects, as I told you. For instance, in our development perspectives, when we're doing the agenda for change, we're doing the agenda for prosperity, we depended so much on data. But I would still tell you that there is a dearth in terms of the availability of credible data. And that's why I also strongly appreciate the partnerships that are evolving around the sharing of data, the collection of data, and the use of data, because the bottom line is you can collect, but if you don't use it appropriately, you would not be able to achieve what actually you're intending to achieve. And that's why I want to commend you. I want to commend all the panelists on behalf of my president, who I said is a champion. And today we have seen the usefulness of data. Even in the political arena, we are trying to do a digital biometric registration of everybody in Sierra Leone. That's just a way of making sure everybody is part of the political process, is part of the demographic analysis that we're trying to do. Without that, it will be very difficult. But it's the high-tech part. Recently, the president visited Israel, and he was introduced to a seasonless type of agriculture built on technology. And these are the sort of things that we're trying to develop. Once you have a high-tech agriculture, the seasonality is not a constraint anymore. You can produce each time you want to produce and this sort of thing. And we've also seen that how it is helping us in our democratic process. Why do I have to leave anybody? One single vote is very important. And I do believe that those institutions which we have established to collect data to make sure no one is left behind must be fully supported. No one country can do it alone, and that's why I commend the global partnership around this evolution of data and information. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, would you come back here for one moment? I loved that speech. It was fantastic. But tell us about one real story, a very short story, that proves your point about what your country is doing as far as data, tech, development. Just a very short story that's got nothing to do with that speech.
There's something that is, I see on the advert, 3G++. I don't understand what it means. But I listened to a colleague here who said 4G brings of speed in high tech. We have the fiber optic. And today I can tell you, my mother, who probably only visited the capital city once in her lifetime, today I send money to her through. You're too excited. It's great. Through mobile. I use mobile money. And she has a telephone she hangs on. So everywhere you see her today, she walks with the telephone. And I think I find it very helpful.
Mama Kamara, how wonderful. Who knew that she'd be part of this panel? All right. We're nearly there, everybody. Representing the President of Ghana, we have Professor Guyan Bafo. He's the Minister for Planning. Minister, the podium is yours.
Thank you so very much. Indeed, I'm representing the President of the Republic. He couldn't make it here today because of some other bilateral discussion that he was having. Excellencies, champions of the data revolution, ladies and gentlemen. Data has taken center stage of the global development discourse, and for a very good reason. We have data all around us. All human activities and events around us have data inherent in them. They are either derived from data or potentially generate data. Sometimes consciously, but oftentimes we are oblivious to the relevance of data. But for our development effort, the effective use of data distinguishes the outcome. Technology holds great potential for data production and use. When we deploy technology for government administrative processes, we enhance the possibility of generating data from them in real time. And for the regular and more organized collection of data, as in our censuses and opinion polls, technology continues to be applied to great benefit. But we need to do much more to exploit the full potential of data possibilities. And one area in which the impact of technology has exploded in recent times is data visualization. This has not only changed the way data are managed, but it has also greatly enhanced the appreciation for data, even among the least technically oriented. So now, statistics has greater following than decades ago. Madam Moderator, the theme of our meeting today seeks to push the data frontier even further for a powerful shift in the way we ought to be thinking about and utilizing data and technology. This is clearly reflected in the SDGs, which point to the expectation that the goals will not only be monitored, but will indeed be driven by data and technology. With the demands placed on all member states from the Sustainable Development Goals, we cannot do less. Data has been made an integral part of the development agenda and is seen not merely as a means to measure and report progress, to quantify the impact of interventions. The data generation and statistical capacity development are in themselves part of the goals and the targets. The current global development agenda, as transformative as it aims to be, is appreciated by all as an ambitious agenda. The set of goals and targets, including the means of implementation of each of the goals, requires a substantial amount of data. We all recall, no doubt, what a daunting task it has been for the interagency expert group defining the indicators to get the right balance of sustainable development indicators, that is the balance between the social, economic, and the environment. The data agenda also seems to be rather infinitely more ambitious. For too many of our countries, and my country being one of them, we have been heavily dependent on periodic but expensive data collection, that is through statistical inquiries, to obtain our development indicators. So we have data for 5 to 10 years intervals. This cannot help us meet the 2030 timeline if we are constrained to 2 to 6 data points only. By the time the next data set is available, we will have missed the mark, with little hope of recovering the SDG path. And as I cast my eyes over the 232 indicators for monitoring the SDGs, it is most striking to me how much more effort is going to be required to meet the data needs. Using of data that could come from routine administrative processes and regular service delivery is indeed the way to go. Governments are elected to attend to the basic needs of its people and their welfare. We must set up systems to track how we are doing this and how well we are measuring up to our promises to our people. We cannot preoccupy ourselves solely with the past, as the dependence on survey data will suggest. We must have up-to-minute recording of relevant events, but little can be achieved without the use of technology. Automation and digitization of many of our processes should help us guide our path to progress and prosperity. Leveraging technology to increase the availability of real-time quality data through partnership and collaboration is an important step to ensure that we deliver and achieve the SDGs. We must revolutionize and we must innovate. Technology gives us the capability to do things differently, more efficiently, I must add, provided we take the necessary precautions. On our part in Ghana, technological innovations will help us ultimately reduce our dependence on the enormous and extensive field operations of censuses and surveys to more routine administrative data systems. The steps we are taking in this direction include the rolling out of a national identification system that will be operationally linked to birth and death registration systems. With regard to the birth and death registration, we see that coverage and completeness will be greatly enhanced by technology, leveraging on the high mobile phone and internet penetration across the country. We have been piloting an automated mobile birth registration system, which we call the M-Birth, since 2016. In the first 8 months of its implementation, in 8 of the 10 administrative regions of the country, the national coverage for birth registration for children under 1 year of age increased from 58% to 63%. And I think one of the panelists actually mentioned that. The Civil Registration of Vital Statistics Program of Africa and the Mobile Registration Project in Ghana are good examples of how productive and valuable partnerships for data and technology advancements can be. It gives viability to partnerships of government, development partners, and multinational institutions, the private sector, and other entities. As part of our process for defining SDGs implementation modalities, we have conducted a comprehensive assessment of the capacity of our national, sector, and district institutions to produce, analyze, and communicate with data. We are clearly confronted with the urgent need for strengthening the national statistical system to work hand in hand with our national planning system to effectively feed into policy formulation as well as monitoring progress. We are partnering with developed and developing countries, statistical organizations alike, to realize this goal. We are grateful for the hand of friendship that has been extended from statistical offices around the world with expertise to strengthen our administrative data and the data ecosystem generally. Yet, we must be mindful of the fact that harnessing technology for data is not only about production, but it is also about usage. Whether from surveys or from routine administrative processes, data must be packaged and disseminated in a way that both excites interest and informs. Every category of users, from the technically savvy to the ordinary woman or man in the village or on the street, must see themselves in the statistics. They must equally be able to appreciate what the statistic means and assess how their duty bearers are doing. Until now, this is probably the part of our statistical system which requires some urgent actions. In the data revolution, you must value the input and the utility of data for all producers and users. We must consider how we involve the general populace and the powerful mobile devices that they hold to get the information required on project implementation, on project monitoring and evaluation at the points closest to them in their communities. In much the same way, we must provide them with the feedback on what their inputs have helped to uncover or enhance. Technology employed in the visualization of data must be fully exploited. We have always needed people of all walks of life to support our bid to generate quality data, but we must now also, in the use of the data, leave no one behind. As our statisticians seek to embrace technology, we must be careful to break away from past practices and perceptions that statisticians only communicate with themselves. The danger with the technology data nexus is that if a conscious effort is not made to communicate better with users, this position will continue to be perpetuated and the less sophisticated data users will be left behind. Also, government entities must embrace technology in their processes to facilitate data generation. The commitment to make data widely available to the citizenry and openness to get the critical inputs of these target beneficiaries should be embraced by all parties, government, the private sector, civil society, development partners, and all. Many of the organizations, and I guess represented in the room today, have taken up this course and have been working tirelessly to improve data production, demonstrate the possibilities of new technology, and most importantly, adopt the most impactful ways to have data speak to the vision of creating a better future for us all. My president, as member of the group of eminent advocates for the SDGs, and indeed the co-chair of that group, is delighted to champion the cause of statistical capacities of member states as they do the other issues relating to the SDGs. In this global development agenda, we must bring statistics along as one of the cross-cutting issues that we must tackle successfully. Ghana, under his leadership, is honored to be very much focused on this agenda. In April of this year, Ghana hosted its first National Data Roadmap Forum with the support of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and we are very appreciative of that. In July, we hosted an International Open Data Conference. I'm delighted that the Vice President of the Republic sits on the board of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We are increasingly convinced that data and technology can truly help change our world if we fully exploit the synergies that their interaction offers. I can emphatically state that our experience so far is a sign of our commitment to achieving the SDGs, and that we can continue to strive towards the new frontiers while ensuring that we strengthen the foundations of our existing data systems. And I call on everyone, special governments, the private sector, the development partners, to more effectively leverage ICT in harnessing data to inform decisions that impact the lives of our people. This, I believe, is the way to create a better future for all. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.